Earlier tutorial, we looked at what pig is and the difference between pig and hive. In this tutorial, we look at how to run pig commands and how pig works at a high level. So we earlier understood that pig is a series of commands that you write. These commands are called pig Latin commands. Just to give you a sense of what this looks like, let's say for example you want to load the data. You can have something like a is equal to load data from a directory. Let's say user data1 slash data.text. Then you will have a certain syntax that follows that. We'll get into the details of the syntax later. Then you can do something like b is equal to filter a by, let's say, some value greater than something. And finally you can do something like dumping the value of the particular value. So what does this essentially mean? What this essentially means is you are writing a series of commands and pig takes one command after the other, interprets it, compiles it, and it triggers a MapReduce job only when it sees one of two commands that we saw here. One is called dump and the other is called store. Okay, so what does dump do? Dump takes the content of the data set, in this case B, and then displays it on the screen. If you want to actually take the data set and store it in HDFS, you can do that using store command. The important thing to understand here is pig always works with data in HDFS. You cannot load data from a local file system. You have to put your data in HDFS and then use pig to work with that information. So what are the various ways in which we can actually run these pig commands? There are multiple ways that you can trigger pig commands or pig jobs. The most common among that is the way that you typically run pig in an interactive mode. This is possible using something called the grunt shell. We will see how you can trigger that shell. So inside that shell, you can type out one command after the other and interactively see the results that you get. So this is the interactive mode of execution. And during this mode, whenever you see a dump or a store, pig will automatically trigger a MapReduce job. The other mode that's less commonly used is a local mode. Here, if you have only a single machine and you want to run your pig command, then you can trigger pig using something like pig local, and you can test your code on a single machine. Once your code is tested and ready, what you can do is you can submit the entire pig script. You can put your series of commands in a file, and then from your command prompt you can directly submit or call the code using something like this, like pig script1.pig, which will go ahead and execute one command after the other. You can also submit pig scripts from a grunt shell. So in order to do that, from a grunt shell you can use a exec command. This will also submit the pig script on batch mode. In addition to this, you can also embed your pig code in other programs. Let's say for example you want to trigger pig from Java, then you can do something like Java, give the class path of your pig jar and name of your package and so on, like typically how you will trigger other Java jar files. So these are various ways in which you can actually run your pig commands. So what does pig do in all these cases? Pig takes one command after the other, it first thing that it does is it interprets the command, it parses it, it then checks it for any errors. Then what it does is it creates a logical plan. It does some optimization on the commands that you write. Then it creates a physical plan and then a corresponding MapReduce plan, which is nothing but your MapReduce job that can then be run on the cluster, submitted on the cluster. So this is the sequence in which Pig will interpret and run your commands. While it is doing that, the important thing to understand is Pig executes this lazily. By this, what it means is only when it sees a dump or a store, the MapReduce job gets called. Until that point of time, there is no execution or submission to the cluster that actually happens. Okay. So with this in mind, let's quickly look at an example of how do you actually run a Pig command. So on our cluster, the way that you invoke a grunt shell is you just call Pig, assuming that Pig is already installed in your cluster. You get into the grunt shell. So here you can actually load the data. We will get into more details of how you will actually load a data set. So in this case, I am loading employee data. So let's say, for example, my data is available already put in HDFS location. So this is available in Big Data Coach employee1.csv. I will be using something called a Pig storage, and the delimiter is a comma. It's a comma separated file, and I'm going to specify my schema. So the first column that is available is the employee ID. Let's say this is an integer. The next thing that's available is the employee name. This is a string. So in Pig you specify this as a character array. The next thing that is available is the department. This is also a string. The last thing that's available is a salary. So I specify this and I load my data. Okay, I have a typo. This should be character array. Once this data is loaded, what I should be doing is, let's say I run a simple filter operation for employees that earn salary greater than a particular amount. So I can do this by saying filter employee by salary greater than, let's say, $30,000. This creates a data set called high paying employees. Now if I want to see the result of this high paying employees, I just have to dump this data set. So as soon as I say dump, this is what we mean by lazy execution. This is when the MapReduce job actually gets triggered. So you can see that Pig has submitted a MapReduce job. It is now processing the data. It is taking the data that we loaded in employee. It's then running a filter condition on top of that, and it will then display the results of the data that we are actually seeing. So it's now saying that these are the 4 employees whose salary was greater than 30,000. Okay. So let's quickly summarize what we understood in the introduction to Pig. So we saw that Pig was developed at Yahoo. It is primarily a platform for analyzing very large data sets. We looked at how you can run Pig interactively using a grunt shell, using script file, or you can run it on a Java program directly. And when you're doing it, Pig goes through the following sequence to interpret your commands. So the commands that you see here are Pig Latin commands. So it will parse it, it will check for the correctness of syntax, it run optimization on top of that. Then finally it creates a jar and then submits it to the cluster so that it then runs as a MapReduce job.